say that I had a lot of pleasure doing this, making the presentation, doing the slides, because it allowed me to sit down and put together my knowledge and my know-how about collaboration, about open science. And I did it in collaboration with other people across the world. This presentation is actually a good example of collaboration. So we had a good brainstorming about open science. So we're going to talk about open science and the future of academia, because academia is changing. So let's put it on the table and eliminate our psychological barriers and accept that fact that academia is changing. And we will see how it is changing. We're trying to identify patterns in order to predict how it will be in the future. Just a disclaimer here, and this is part of the ethics of the open. This is done in collaboration with other 4 individuals. None of them are in Canada. 2 of them are in Europe. 2 of them are in the United States. I only met 1 person, but we're good collaborators. Okay, so this is how stuff is done today. So I'll present my views on open science, which are influenced by all this international community working on open and peer-to-peer practices. But at the same time, so they contributed with slides, they contribute ideas, but I will present. So some of my ideas, some of my views might not be compatible with their views. So that is my disclaimer here. So before we talk about open science, I would like us to take a step back and take a look from the sky to the scientific process itself. Okay? So it is an emergent process. Okay, and I'm talking here to physicists, so I hope everybody knows what's an emergent process. We all know about complex dynamical systems. And this emergent process relies on some very important conditions. Some of them are individual and others are social. And it's important to remember these conditions throughout the presentation, because science and scientific development sits on these conditions. And as these conditions change, they are the foundation of the process. The process changes. So we will see one by one how these things are already changing today. Some of these conditions are needs and incentives. Okay, we need a need, right, to develop science, and sometimes, unfortunately, wars, are bringing new needs for new technologies, and science basically advances pretty fast during these periods. Incentives. Why do we do science? There are intrinsic incentives. I do science because it gives me value as a person, because this is what I like to do, or because I'm trying to save the world. Or I do science because I can become popular, or I can make some money, or whatever. There are cultural, social, and political conditions. So this is the environment in which the scientific process evolves. There are also economic conditions. We need access to labs, access to tools, to materials. We can't do physics without these tangible assets. We need access to what I call immaterials, access to data, to information, and to knowledge. And as the open science movement began, it was mostly about sharing information and sharing knowledge. Okay, now it's much further than that. But this is how essentially it started, access to data, information, and knowledge. And it also depends on institutions. Okay, so the way I define institutions is a set of relations that we agree upon, and these relations, they drive the way we do things. They drive how we collaborate, how we make decisions, how we make stuff happen. Okay? And so the institution is also part of the conditions. Some institutions are better for science, for scientific breakthroughs. Other institutions, they stifle creativity and scientific development. So this is a choice that we make, and that choice can be conditioned by other factors. So we'll see how these conditions are affected today by new possibilities. Okay. I also want to say that open science is not a dream of somebody that woke up in the morning. It's not a social project that somebody designed and tried to gather support to implement. Open science is a natural process. It's something that happens. Either you want it or you don't want it. And why it happens and why it happens the way it happens, it's because there are new possibilities now that were not there before. Okay? And these possibilities are brought by internet and by the digital technology around us, which essentially allows us to establish real-time collaboration with people across the planet, allows us to join vast networks, to collaborate at vast scales, to share data massively and so on. So these things were not possible before. And once you have new possibilities in your environment, people are going to try to use them, try to implement them in different ways. And sometimes they develop new methods, they develop new ways of doing things. And some of these things, they turn out to be better. And they get adoption and they get implemented. And this is how science is changing. So open science is a process. Okay? It's not a dream of somebody, it's not a social project, it's just a process that is happening. So these are the conditions for scientific development. Now let's talk about breakthroughs, which are huge leaps in scientific development. Studies show that there are three major factors for interaction. You can call that collaboration. The more you interact with people, the better your probability to come up with a great idea. Cross-fertilization, you can think of interdisciplinary work, but it goes beyond just academia. We can talk about cross-fertilization between academia and the military, or the academia and the health sector, or the academia and the community of entrepreneurs, and so on. Cross-fertilization goes across values. And another important factor is what they call free-flowing hierarchy, meaning that those who do science, they need to have the freedom to explore and to express their ideas and to criticize dogmas and so on. Okay? So you need to have a hierarchy that is free-flowing, meaning that yes, somebody is in charge for some time, for some aspects of the scientific research, but the student and the researcher has a lot of freedom to operate. So these are main factors that influence scientific breakthrough. And again, before talking about open science and defining open science, I want to pose some really crucial problems of science today. Because open science, as it develops, as it emerges as a continuous process, it formulates solutions to these problems. And if it becomes successful, it's because it solves some of these problems. Otherwise, there is no adoption of these practices. So the fundamental point here is that science is more and more centric. Why? Because there is an increased demand for scientific research. And at the same time, the economies don't grow as fast as to supply this demand. Okay? So there's not enough funding. The funding doesn't keep up with the demand for new technologies or new science. So it's unsustainable. Okay, it can't continue like that, and we can see the symptoms. Researchers spend more and more time to write proposals for grants, and they get less and less grants. Okay, so it creates an environment of scarcity, which, as a result, creates a lot of competition in science, which is counterproductive. One solution, always in transitions when we have problems, the nearest solution is implemented first, so let's try to get money from the private sector. But we know how that is generating other problems in terms of intellectual property. There's a clash of culture between academia and entrepreneurs and companies and so on. So one hint of the solutions that open science brings here, puts on the table, is a better allocation of the already existing resources. So what is open science? I'm going to spend a bit of time on this definition because there's some key elements that I'm going to see them one by one. So open science movement explores and prototypes new practices and methods of production, diffusion, and use of knowledge, it consists, nothing new there, it consists of a variety of initiatives, open access, open data, and open labs, aiming at a more open, transparent, and collaborative scientific process, both inside and outside academic research. Okay? So open access, open data, and open labs, the movement of open science started with let's share, let's make available scientific publications. Okay, they're siloed, they're controlled by some companies, and you know, we pay for the scientific research already. Why do we have to pay for the papers? Okay? Why do we have to pay for access to these knowledge? So this is how the movement started. Okay? It's all about open access, and we talk about access here. When we talk about access here, we talk about access to information, access to knowledge. And then you move towards let's open the data. Okay, and there's a problem there, but it's happening more and more because people are seeing the benefits. What does mean? What this means? It means to share your data, not just your analysis in the form of a paper. Okay, but sharing data is messy. And the way incentives are set up in the scientific endeavor is that we all want to look good, okay? And that graphic, when you say this is a typical result, we all know that this is a bit of a lie because there's a lot of time involved in massaging that data, in doing data analysis and conditioning and so on for that graph to look good, and that's probably the best shot we got in many attempts. So sharing the data, it's a bit of sharing the mess, okay? And people are not willing to open that mess to the public. Okay? And also sharing the data means sharing early, sharing the data even before you publish. Okay, have an experiment, you have your data, why don't you share it right away and talk about it with a community of researchers that might be interested and see other things or help you analyze the data. Okay? So now we're getting there slowly. Open labs means give access to other people from academia, but not only from academia, to your lab. Okay, and that poses a lot of problems also because you know it's all about this identity that we have. You know, it's my lab within my institution. Why should I give access to somebody else that has a different culture or something else? It's also the notion of property. You know, it's my lab, it's my equipment, it's my microscope. I spend a lot of money buying it and maintaining it. So there's a lot of cultural barriers here to open the labs, but it is happening again, and people that do it, they understand the benefits, and I think it's going to become a trend. Another important thing here, collaborative scientific process, both inside and outside academia. So this is very important because you see an overspill of scientific activity, of scientific research through the barriers of what we normally call the academic institution. Okay, so science, it's not just made within academia. Okay. Talk about open source development, and also talk about citizen science. Okay. So it's also a leakage out of the institutions of science. So open science is not hippie science. Okay. It is a natural process that is occurring. It has very strong trends. Some of them are becoming very powerful, and they're operating very serious changes. It is a solution to the problem of sourcing scientific development, meaning bringing resources to, as in funding and as in access to equipment and materials and so on. And it is also better science. It's a science that shares not just solutions or good results, but also shares problems, shares the data. There's a lot of people thinking about problems, so there's more complexity. We can tackle more complex problems and so on. I think it's a better science, and it solves some of the problems with sourcing. So we have here the two sides of the equation, demand and supply. Okay, so when we talk about the problems of scientific research today, being a better science, it provides results in a more efficient way. So it solves the supply side, and then solving some of the problems of sourcing. First one is the demand. Solving some problems of sourcing, so it solves the supply side. It reduces reliance on funding. So let's look at the university and see how it starts to crumble. Okay? There are three major pillars that justify the existence of a university. Okay, first of all is teaching and forming of students. Second is issuing of a certificate of knowledge and know-how. And the third one is conducting research. Okay. So the first pillar here, we already see new practices with Coursera, Udacity, and other online networks where you see individual professors that have an international reputation giving courses to students outside of the academic curriculum. So this happens on an online network. Just at the bottom of it, you see a lot of people learning a bunch of stuff just by going on the internet. This is like peer-to-peer learning, right? So you see these practices becoming stronger and stronger. Certificate, well, you see also these professors that have an international reputation and give courses. You see them also issuing verified certificates. So you take a course online on one of these networks with some of these professors. Some of them are from Stanford, MIT, Harvard, so they're very good professors there, but also good professors that don't have these credentials, but they're also very good. And so the system is set up so that you don't only take the course and learn something, but you also give a certificate. I took this course, and this is valued in society. That's what's important. And the research. Okay, so we're on this line here. The third element, the research. We see, for example, the open source movement, which is creating a lot of new technology. Starting to do, so it started with tinkering, it's moving now towards engineering, which is a more serious thing, and slowly getting into pure science. We see that mostly with biohacking spaces where they play with DNA, bacteria, so it happens in the domain of biotech, biotechnology, more than other domains. And then you have the citizen science movement, okay, which is research done with the help of citizens. And citizens can be involved in data collection, in fitting the models and optimizing some models or bringing solutions to problems, and also in data analysis. Okay, so you have here on the right an example from Zooniverse, which the project calls upon people using internet tools to detect cancer cells. Okay. So this is analysis of images of samples from real patients, real humans. And it's because it can be, there is no algorithm to do it automatically. Okay, they appeal to the population to help them. There's a training process, so that you learn how to identify cancer cells, and then you analyze these images and you put that data into the database. So this is about citizen science. So we see that these three pillars of the university here, we're seeing cracks. What I mean by that, you see practices that are developing outside of the institution that are in direct competition with what the institution is supposed to be. So the question here is, are the university going to adapt to these trends in order to save their existence, or are they going to morph into something completely different? So basically, that's the message for universities. If you don't adapt, you'll essentially become obsolete. Another important thing, a trend that happens in science now, and we see this trend in all the open practices, is the movement from a normal law distribution to a power law distribution. What do I mean by that? It's if you look at how value is created in a company or in the lab, and if you take all the people involved in a project, okay, the majority of the people, they produce a maximum amount of value. Okay? And very few people produce more value because there's no incentives. Why should I work more than the rest? Okay? And very few people produce less than the majority because simply they get kicked out, right? They're not no passive people. So they get eliminated. So you have a normal distribution when you look at how individuals contribute to projects. okay, to value, how the individuals contribute to value creation, be it in academia or in a company or whatever. Okay? But you see in open communities, you see a different distribution. Most of the people contribute very little, and just a few individuals produce a lot of value. Okay, so moving towards this new distribution. And the majority, so the bulk of the value that is created by this great majority that contribute just a little bit. Okay, so when we talk about open science, or when we talk about citizen science, if you have a research and you call the population to do data analysis, well, that data analysis is done in small bits by thousands of individuals. Okay, so science in its approaches, okay, turns long tail, but also in the way we collaborate within academia, we see this trend. So co-authorship has been increasingly increasing. So the first paper with 1,000 authors was published in 2004. A paper with 3,000 authors came in 2008, and by last year, a total of 120 physics papers had more than 1,000 authors. So you see that we're getting beyond this normal way of doing approaching scientific research projects where we have 2 or 3 collaborators in a lab, or maybe 1 or 2 in other universities, small scale stuff. We're moving towards a long tail type of distribution. Okay, this is happening again. Nobody planned for it. This is just happening because it has to happen, because we have the tools to make it happen, and when we utilize these tools and try them out, it turns out to be good. Other practices that we see that also relate to open science is sourcing, right? It's how do you get money for your research? So now the population, the people, the long tail, they not only get involved in research to do data analysis and so on, right? But they also actively fund research. Okay? And this is very serious business. I mean, if you just look at the figures here, $300,000 for a project. Okay, this starts to be a good grant. Okay, if you think about it. So crowdfunding should not be ignored as a way to include the population in the scientific development. These are some examples of platforms that researchers can use to crowdfund their science. Okay, so instead of writing a grant, you just include the population to crowdfund stuff. And what's interesting here is that universities are catching up. Okay, so some universities are changing. They see the pressure, they see the trends, they see that their old model becomes obsolete. They don't want to become obsolete themselves, so they're engaging in changing themselves, right? So University of Virginia, they actually adopted a crowdfunding platform, and now they have a university crowdfunding platform that they experiment with, that professors can and students can use. So this is really attached to the university, and it's run by the university. And these are third-party platforms that researchers can use. And I think this is going to be more. You're going to see that more and more. Universities are adopting and appropriating themselves to these new processes. So things are changing. Things are changing. Either we want it or either we don't want it. There are new possibilities. People try them out. It turns out to be very successful, some of them, and then they get implemented, they get adoption. This is how change is done. But in order to change our institutions, we have a governance in place, so we need to make some decisions, right? Otherwise, we create tension in the system and it might crack. So how do we think about institutional change? What do we need to change within our institutions? So the first thing that comes to mind is the incentive system. Okay, this model is obsolete. You are in a lab, do your research, produce a paper, then wait for people to cite you, and then you get the money because you gain some reputation. Okay, this is obsolete. Just the crowdfunding model, we see that departs from this model of sourcing science or funding science. So the incentive mechanism has to change. Crowdfunding, for example, responds very well to projects that are appealing to some sensitive chord of the population. save the whales, save the planet, save these and save that, okay, cancer and so on. And this might not be the priority of governments. Okay, so we can actually get some funding from these sources that normally don't pass through the classical filter. Also, what needs to change is the way we think about it's the way we think of how we do the research, okay, and how we share resources, how we collaborate. So there's these three words here: connect, share, and co-create, and it requires some cultural change. And this is also an important barrier. So one of the things in science is that we need to get into the habit of joining networks. We need to actively search for networks, for people that are interested in the same problems, and try to join them, build relationships. This is one thing that we have to understand and change at a personal level. Then we have to get into the habit of sharing immaterials and intangibles. Okay, have your data before you publish, put it somewhere, and facilitate the discussion around it. Try to have people contribute to your idea in a meaningful way. Share your protocols, share your methods, your little tricks, part of the know-how in the lab, okay? Just share them and with others. And a big one is sharing material resources. So we're gonna go through that. But in order to implement these changes here, we need a few things. I mean, you can't just open your lab to anyone and hope that they're going to take care of your resources, of your microscope, and so on, and give you some credit for it. Okay, so we need to put some tools in place. We need to put some governance. We need governance in place. We need to have some standards in place, and we need to have a different incentive mechanism. Why would I share my microscope with the other people in the department or in the faculty or from the university, or why would I open it to the population outside? Okay, what is my incentive to do that? So let's talk about sharing of materials, and this is an example of a tool that some of my collaborators are working on. So the model here is de-silo, collaborate, and thrive. Okay, and this is done by a group in England, in London actually, called Enshare. So why Enshare? It's because at the moment we have people and organizations. These organizations have material resources. These resources are locked into groups, silos. And the idea here is to break these silos and put these materials into a common pool. It doesn't mean give your microscope away and renounce ownership. Okay, but you keep it as your property, but you provide access. So it's all about putting stuff in a virtual pool of resources. That machine can still stay in your lab, but you actually you create a database of the tools that you have, and you provide access, and there is a governance in place, and there's an incentive system in place in order to bring everything forward. So why would you do that? We can pinpoint here some of these fundamental conditions of scientific development. Cost savings, talking about economic conditions and resources. New partnerships, by creating this common pool of resources, you can increase interaction and collaboration between individuals, and so on. So you can actually go to the presentation and go to Enshare and see what you're going to go to this slide because there's so much work there. Enshare does. So what else needs to change? There's something fundamental that needs to change. It's the scientific instruments that we use. They need to change. And this is where SENSORICA fits in, because we are designing the products for open science. We're designing scientific instruments for open science. Okay, we're a bit ahead of the game here because the market is not there yet, but we know that this is going to go towards that direction. So what are the scientific instruments of the future? Okay, let's just look at some examples here to see how things have evolved already. Okay, just take the card to go. Okay, I don't know if you're familiar with that. In Montreal, you can have a card and there are cars distributed throughout the city. You have a GPS, you go on your phone, find the car, punch the car, get in, drive, leave it, and do your business, and somebody else will take it and put it somewhere else. Okay. Now, you can't do that with your personal car because it has not been designed to be shared. Okay. The first thing, you have to find the thing. Okay. So in this case of the car, the GPS is used to find the thing. In order to use it, you gotta find it, right? You have to know what it is. And then the car also has features to be inherently shareable. Okay. It has sensors, for example. So if you bump the car or make an accident or something, they know the speed, they know what happened. Okay, they know if you've used the car. Okay, your car doesn't have these features because it is assumed that you are the only user of that product. It was not made to be shared. It was made to be owned and used only by you. Also, these cars, they have limited acceleration and something that they're optimized for gas mileage instead of being optimized for power and so on. So they are designed to be shared. Look at your cell phone. Okay, we're far from the telephone. The cell phone has morphed into an object that allows you to socialize your life. Okay, so it is very easy now to take your phone, take a picture, and you have one button to share it on Facebook. Okay, so the phone has morphed from a device to communicate one-to-one to a device to socialize your life and to communicate one-to-many. Okay? So we're seeing here that normal objects that we're used to, they are morphing into something else. Why? Because of these changes that happen everywhere. It's the same pattern. Okay, they have to adapt to the new reality. They have to adapt to the fact that yes, we have a technology that allows us to stay in contact and to engage in discussions one-to-many, many-to-many, and so on. So these products, these objects are changing themselves based on these new possibilities that we have. Well, the scientific instrument has to change too. Okay? Now imagine a scientific instrument where you collect your data and you have one button operation to share that data to an online community of researchers that are interested in the same topic. Okay? Why would you have to go through saving the data, maybe putting it to a different format, uploading it to something? Why do you have to go through 4 or 5 processes to share data when it can be very easy? Okay. So your scientific instrument has to become a tool to socialize your data, to socialize your work. Okay. But it's more than that. We have to make them shareable as well. If you want to use them, if you want to give them to other people to use them, allow access to them. Okay. So maybe they need to have some sensors to detect abuse. Did you drop my microscope? Why did you bang the hammer on my microscope? Okay, so they have to inherit these properties in order for them to allow you to socialize your work and in order for them to allow you to share them happily. Okay, maybe some tags to know where they are. Who has my microscope? Is it this guy that took it or the other guy, and so on. So the scientific instrument is changing, and we believe the scientific instrument is going to become open source because you can customize it. It's going to become shareable. It's going to become modular. And we'll see the concept of Lego labs, where you can take it apart and assemble it into something else. It's going to become interoperable. One of the biggest problems in the labs, and I have a lot of experience with this, is that your camera is not compatible with the microscope stage, it's not compatible with the pump, and when you have to do integration and do some experiment using all these devices, because they come from different companies, they don't work together. So you have to spend a lot of money, okay, to do this integration, and once Windows changes and the drivers are changing, then you have to start all over again. So it costs a lot of money to maintain the infrastructure, the lab infrastructure, because they are by design not to be shared, they're by design not to be interoperable. Okay? And I think they got to go this way. Why? Because it solves the sourcing problem. Because it makes it easier for us to get access to resources and to mix and match them together to reduce the costs of research. It responds to one of the fundamental problems that science has today. Socializable, okay? So one-click operation to share your data. And obviously ecological and ethical. I think we're more and more sensitive to these issues. Talking about sharing, okay, talking about the scientific. So the scientific instrument has to change, but the scientific lab, I think it has to change. Okay? And there are three concepts that we're putting forward here. One of them is the Lego lab. Okay. The other one is the open lab networks. And the third one is the lab online, which we're trying to implement. So the Lego lab basically allows you to, once you have once you have your instruments modular and interoperable, you can take them apart or assemble them in different ways without the instruments. Okay? So you can build experimental systems now that work. Okay, there are some that are compatible with one another. That's the idea of that's the essence of the lab. You can go with open structures. Oh, there's a lot of links here. So if you go to the presentation, you can have the benefit to dig into these things a little deeper. Open structures, it's an online community that try to define new standards for mechanical design. Okay, and these standards allows you to build parts, components, and structures. Okay, so the parts are designed in such a way that you can assemble them into components, and the components you can assemble them into structures, and then you can take the structures and components apart, take out the pieces, and make something else. Okay? I think this is how the lab should become, because the academic environment is very dynamic, and the next student comes, takes apart the system, and wants to make it his own. Okay, so there's a lot of dismantling and reassembling in academic labs. It's a very dynamic environment, right? So we need this kind of modularity and interoperability. So talking about the open lab networks, meaning everyone in the university opens the lab. Obviously, you need a platform for sharing these resources, and you need some governance in place. You don't just do it like that, because it's not sustainable. So you open the labs, meaning you provide access to the labs, and that microscope that is in your lab, it's actually part of a database somewhere. Everybody in the university knows this. It is available on Monday from 4 to 5. I can go there, and if I have the credentials, I can use them. Okay. So you have a bunch of labs that are open, and everybody owns their own stuff, but they provide access to everybody else according to some rules, okay, to these instruments. And I think this is a major problem. We worked at McGill, and we had a confocal microscope. I think we spent $250,000 on it 6 or 7 years ago. And it was used maybe for 2 months. So we paid it with our tax money, right? $250,000 for a piece of equipment that was used maybe 2 months. And I got frustrated one day when there was a student that was just next door telling me that he's flying to Vancouver because he's collaborating with some group over there that have a confocal microscope. And he didn't know that we had one accumulating dust in our. So these, I'm sure you have these kind of stories. Okay, scientific equipment is used maybe 5–10% of the time. Okay, so there's a huge capacity there to tap into that. We need the tools and the governance in place in order to make it happen in a very ordered and structured way. What is the concept of lab online? This is about providing remote access. This is about teleproximity. Instead of flying someone from Japan that specializes in some things to observe an experiment with you in real time, you can actually give access to the lab through the internet to that person. You can use cameras, you can give access to the data that comes out from the scientific instruments, whatever, and even give control the person to the scientific instruments. Okay? So the internet allows us to collaborate and to coordinate in real time across physical barriers, and we can use that to provide access, remote access to the lab. And there's a huge benefit there, because sometimes a physicist working on biomedical applications, this is what I did actually, this is my stuff, laser applications to biology and medicine, and when I shine the laser on something, what I can see ionization, I can see plasma, I can look at the color and think about the energy that is released or whatever. The doctor or the biologist is going to see something else. It's going to see some biological effects in the same phenomenon. So it's very important to have two pair of eyes observing the thing in real time and slowly trying to navigate towards improving the conditions or tweaking the system or optimizing the system towards the result. Right? Otherwise, it can take more time It's just going back and forth with a very limited amount of data, a picture here, a graph there, and so on. The life experiment is very rich in information, and being there together, I think it's a huge value. But when we talk about Lego Lab, and when we talk about the Open Lab and so on, now think back to how the scientific instrument needs to evolve in order to meet some criteria to let that happen, right? So you can't give access in teleproximity to a specialist in your lab if your instrument doesn't broadcast data live on the internet, or it doesn't give someone's control operating through the internet, right? So okay, open science, it seems like a big dream, like a big process, and always the question is, what can we do now? And this is what we call the adjacent possible. The adjacent possible is I'm here, I can just do one step, and I'm there. It doesn't require other processes in between to get somewhere. Okay, it's something that we can do now. We can do tomorrow as you go home. So what are the things that we can do? Well, first thing is that look into network resource planning systems. Okay, and this is something that SENSORICA develops in collaboration with other people. So we're developing a system that allows you to put resources together, maintain ownership, add some governance on top of it, okay, and ensure that these resources they flow where the needs are in your ecosystem. Okay, and network resource planning systems, because they're not made for hierarchical organizations, they're made for networks, and I think scientific communities are more network type rather than hierarchical. Adopt value accounting systems. Like once you have 1,000 people on a paper, okay, what is the merit? And what's the difference between the first one, the first author, and the 20th author? Okay, is there a meaningful difference? We don't know. So what we see here is that the incentive system, based on the publication and based on citations, it breaks down once you have the long tail applied to scientific development. Okay, so you need a more refined system of accounting for contributions to scientific development. Okay, this is what we call value accounting. Like who did what in this research? Maybe somebody spent 5 minutes to find a cancer cell on a slide. That's fine. That's recorded somewhere, and because you have that 5 minutes recorded, something is much more meaningful than just having the person being at the end of the 1,000 list of authors, right? Which doesn't tell you anything. Okay, so value accounting systems are methods, are tools that allows you to account for contributions that go into the scientific process. Contributions in funding, contributions with materials. I showed my microscope. Why shouldn't I be rewarded in some way? Okay, recognized as giving my lab for 2 days to do this experiment. I contributed to the crowdfunding. Why shouldn't I be recognized for that? I contributed to data analysis, whatever. Okay, and then over time, people build profiles, and you can see who's engaging in what type of activity and who has contributed most to this or that research. Implement the Open Lab online. I mean, you can do that with the webcams now. If you have, you can start implementing these measures right away of providing access to your lab environment, just for the heck of it, just for sharing some excitement with your friends or with your collaborators. Hey, look what I got. This is funny. Come and see it. Monday, we're going to have a group meeting here. We're going to have a webcam and reproduce the experiment, and everybody can have fun. It strengthens the group, the collaboration. These are things that you can easily implement tomorrow. Adopt some models like the Open Alliance model. This is a little bit more touchy. It's how do you build an infrastructure for vast collaboration involving not just academic labs, but also private sector and which means entrepreneurs and public society and so on. This is a little more touchy. Another one is commit to open source development and to equipment. Stop buying proprietary equipment because it's going to cost you more down the line because of all these problems of interoperability and incompatibilities. Okay, it's better to adopt open source equipment and tools because they're cheaper, because they're modular, because they're more interoperable, They allow other people to reproduce data more easily because there's no hidden stuff. And going to other open-science practices like join networks, talk about it, share your paper, don't publish it, close the publication, and so on. Now I'm just going to present some very concrete examples, and I'm going to go fast with this. So SENSORICA is an online network with a real lab in Montreal, so we do some development there. We also have collaboration with academia on the economic model that we're trying to put in place, and also on innovation and technology. Okay, we work with academic labs. Students come to our lab.